Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming this morning to our annual meeting. I'm Marianne Vega Clancy, the president of the League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego. I hope that you have all signed in. If you haven't signed in, please raise your hand and we'll bring by the sign-up sheet. I want to review just very quickly our agenda today. First, we're going to hear from our speaker, Abigail Stepnitz. Then we'll take a brief break for everyone to serve themselves lunch, but this is a working meeting, so we will do that quickly. We'll come back to the table, and you will eat while we conduct our business today. We'll have a few member acknowledgments, a brief president's report, a treasurer's report, the proposed budget for the coming year. We do have a bylaws amendment, and the proposed program, and election of officers and directors. I would like to remind everyone of our mission, of who we are. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. We envision a democracy where every person has a desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate, and we are an organization that respects and values the richness of our community and each one of our members. After our meeting, by the way, I invite you to join us for our March for Democracy. More on that later. So today, there we go. We are delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Abigail Stepnitz, who will be discussing a relevant and timely topic, our constitutional crisis. Thank you for joining us this morning. Dr. Stepnitz is an assistant professor of political science and international relations at the University of San Diego, with a PhD from Berkeley, degrees from the London School of Economics and the University of San Francisco, and her work in policy analysis and advocacy. She brings a wealth of expertise in constitutional law, immigration, climate change, and human rights. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Abigail Stepnitz.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for having me. All right, so let me get myself set up a little bit here. Marianne basically did my introduction. I teach at USD. I teach constitutional law. This fall, I'm teaching separation of powers. And what else am I teaching? I'm teaching constitutional rights and liberties. So it's a tricky time to teach these subjects, right? And sometimes I joke that they're going to have to transfer me to history because so many of the things that I do now feel like relics from the past. But here we are trying to make the Constitution something for today. So what I'm going to do here is get us started a little bit. So my focus for today is on this idea of performance. Now, I chose this topic, spoke with Marianne about this topic a while ago when we knew that today's meeting would coincide with the planned military parade and the birthday celebration for President Trump and kind of what that meant based on what it looked like. And it sort of just so happens that now in the interim month or so, we have so many more opportunities to think about what democracy looks like, what we see in Los Angeles, what we see with the arrest and throwing to the ground of one of our senators, Senator Padilla, what we see in the conference that Secretary Noem was giving, the press conference, and the language of liberating Los Angeles and delegitimizing our leadership here in California, right? There's so many more opportunities that we've had. So I'm going to try to touch on a lot of that. There is also the reality that we have tons of pending litigation. The Supreme Court is running really behind, frankly, this year on letting us know what they think about things. I think they have something like 27 cases remaining. I think they're going to have to work into July, which I don't think they like very much. So there's a lot of other stuff going on. That is all to say we can talk about some of that at the end. We have space for questions, but I did try to give it this focus here, this question of performance and visuals and narratives and stories. That's what I'm going to try to use to tie a lot of this together, but feel free to ask questions about other things as we move along here. I should say I'm not great at it's already bad. I'm not great with PowerPoint, and so mostly I just have photos up there for you to give you something to look at that isn't me. Most of it's what I have here. So I wanted to start with some questions to organize our thinking, right? That we think about the fact that a constitutional democracy doesn't really exist inside the White House or inside the Supreme Court, right? But in public spaces, democracy is a group project, right? Whether you like it or not. And you don't get to pick your group members, right? So we all are supposed to be doing this together. If democracy takes place in the streets with the people who are here, who hold the most important office in the land, right? The office of citizen, then what does it mean to see democracy playing out alongside something like today's planned military parade, right? So, National Guard deployments to Los Angeles, framed as an insurrection, ongoing creation of state-backed media to tell us what we see, right, compared to what we actually see. How are we supposed to reconcile these things? So what I would like to start with is that we really need to think about the role of spectacle and to understand how spectacle functions as both part of democracy's lifeblood, right, and also as something that puts us in peril. What is the difference between people doing democracy collectively out loud, outside, in places where it can be seen, and public demonstrations that actually detract from democracy, right, or from democratic life and democratic values and norms? I don't actually have answers. I should say that as well. I almost never have answers. I just have questions, and then we can think about answers together, right? So how can we learn about who we are? This is something we hear a lot right now. You turn on the news or you listen to a podcast and someone will say to you, well, this isn't America. This isn't who we are. We don't arrest senators. We don't prohibit elected representatives from going in to look at a detention center, right? We don't suppress speech. Well, we have a complicated history, right? And sometimes you have to look at who we are, and we're gonna do a little bit of that here. So a lot of my work academically focuses on narratives. What kind of stories do we tell, right? Because in a lot of ways, laws are stories. They are expressions of collective will. They're expressions of what we're prepared to tolerate, right? What do we criminalize? What do we not? Even once we've criminalized something, right? What's the difference between criminalizing jaywalking, which is almost never enforced, and criminalizing murder, right? Which I think most of us would hope would be enforced. If you imagine these abstract concepts, right, these collections of ideas that we bring together, the law is a bit of a story. It's a story about who we think we are and about who we would like to be, right? It's a descriptive story, and it's a normative story. It has this ideal built into it. And so when I look at these protests or these parades or all of these other stories, I think a lot about who do we think we are based on the way that we're performing here, right? How can we get to what really matters? And I think for today, I want us to think about whether or not what we see unfolding right now is a new story. Or does it have roots perhaps farther back in our history, things that we can point to and remember? I was saying to one of your members earlier, spend a lot of my time with people who weren't alive on 9/11, which is a really weird shift because, you know, when I first started teaching, they remembered, and now they don't. And so it's interesting to talk about history with folks who maybe remember some of the things that I'll talk about today. Not all of them, don't worry. But like, the first Gulf War, we had one, so that'll be interesting. Okay, so is this new? What's our story? What can we learn about who we are, right? What's the function of spectacle? These are my organizing questions for today. Okay, so I want to start with the military parade and some other images of other parades, okay? And we'll do maybe a little bit of a fun guessing game here about what we can look to. Some of these are international examples, and some of them are domestic examples. So the most terrifying example of big military spectacles that have collapsed into the celebration of a single person, perhaps unsurprisingly, the award goes to the Nazi regime. The photo here, this is from Hitler's 47th birthday. This is in 1936. You have Panzer tanks rolling down the streets here in Berlin, and Hitler was riding in a Mercedes. By 1939, for his 50th birthday celebration, there was a 4-hour parade, 50,000 troops, 162 aircraft, and 2 million spectators, right? An escalating pattern of a regime which is obviously fascist, right? Where military might is performing allegiance to a specific leader. Probably the worst historical example we can point to of a performance, a spectacle in celebration of a single idealized leader, right, wielding tighter and tighter fascist control over the state. Okay. This is not a parade that enhances constitutional principles. It is not a public performance of democratic norms. It is the opposite of all of those things. And we can look to some contemporary examples as well. So if you look to the photo in the middle here, the soldiers in green with the kind of red background, this is Putin's Victory Day parade, where he brings out hypersonic missiles and people celebrate that. The North Korean example, top right over there, this also often coincides with the Kim dynasty's birthdays of leaders over time, and they also roll out nuclear weapons here. They're called Day of the Sun marches, right? The common thread here for the historical example of Nazi Germany and the contemporary examples of North Korea and Russia are military power being subordinated to personal glorification, right? Rather than a kind of abstract celebration of national service or even a celebration of a specific military victory. But we have other examples, right? We have more democratic examples. So generally, we think of examples rooted in specific victories, right? Commemorating the end of a war, perhaps, or some kind of constitutional transition. So down here at the bottom, this slightly blurry photo, this is a review of the armies from 1865, the Union Army, and the end of the Civil War. Also a parade to celebrate the country no longer being at war with itself, right? At least not on paper. We have over here where you see the USA Army written there. That's JFK's inauguration, 1961. Right? A celebration of the peaceful transfer of power between presidents, okay? Over here in this corner, this was a parade to celebrate the end of Desert Storm, 1991, right? And up here, or is that all of them? Oh, and then obviously at the top here, the parade that President Trump says is his inspiration for today's events, those are the Bastille Day events in France, right? Held every year to honor the French Revolution and the memory of the French Revolution. So when we think about what we see unfolding today, not that you can always put something exactly into a bucket that is already occupied by something else, but where do we see these events falling, right? Some of these, and folks can have agreements or disagreements, right, with these categories as well. right? A lot of people died in Desert Storm, right? Maybe you didn't think Kennedy did a great job. That's fine. But there's a difference of tone here, right, in terms of the position of the individual leadership and the understanding of the function of the military in particular with regard to that individual leadership. So if the display is meant to idealize a leader or to celebrate this idealized leader and not to celebrate perhaps the state itself, right, which in our case is meant to be a plural democracy, a democracy with lots of different views contained inside of it, and not meant to celebrate some identifiable state triumph. It is the 250th anniversary of the Continental Congress establishing the U.S. Army. Perhaps that is what is the only thing that is being celebrated today. But if you start to drift into these other more concerning examples, right, then that is when scholars of authoritarianism, scholars of fascism will tell us that this is not a good sign for democratic health. So Robert Paxton, a scholar of authoritarianism, he offers a 5-stage framework for thinking about drift away from democracy or drift into authoritarianism. And what he would say is that fascist movements, right, they start by kind of gaining popularity. That is the first stage. In the second stage, they move into what he calls rooting, right, becoming established as part of your, what is no longer at that point a democratic framework. And they do this, they establish this rooting precisely through spectacular displays that blur the boundaries between state and individual leadership, right? That are big, that draw a lot of attention, and that place power in that one idealized person, not in the state, and certainly not in the people. So these examples from North Korea, Russia, from Nazi Germany, right? These are clear examples of a state that is enmeshed with a charismatic leader, right? Where charisma is a function of the type of leadership, not a description of a personality. Right? And maybe our historical examples, we are closer to them. We are less able to look at them objectively. However, still, perhaps our examples, our domestic examples, they feel more like celebration and less like idolization. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we think we see today, right? And I think in order to do that, we need to look at our own past and we need to look at the other spectacles unfolding at the same time, right? It is not a coincidence, I don't think anyway, that you would have the National Guard pressed, the California National Guard pressed into service by the president in Los Angeles, that you would have Marines deployed and engaging in civilian law enforcement at the same time that you would see these celebrations in DC. So do we need to be concerned with this? Do we need to be concerned about a fusion of our domestic politics with idolization of a specific leader, right? Or are we on the side, the more familiar side for our domestic events here? There was an article in The Atlantic last week, I don't know if you saw this, Corey Shake of the American Enterprise Institute writes a defense of the parade in which she says, quote, "Not everything the Trump administration does is a threat to democracy," right? And points back to the example of the French. Now, the French are very good at reminding their government who is in charge. Have you ever tried to fly into or out of France or take a train through France? Someone's always protesting something. Something's always on fire, right? The air traffic controllers are always on strike. The taxi drivers are striking, right? I don't think the French government is unsure of what their people think. And if this can be a Bastille kind of moment, right, with sentiment for the American public, perhaps that would be a good reminder as well, right? But perhaps this is where we are. Now, during Trump's first term, his then Joint Chiefs of Staff Vice Chairman Paul Salva said of military parades, that's, quote, what dictators do, right? So are we in the what dictators do box, or is Corey Shake right? This is something like Bastille Day. let's think about it a little bit. Oh gosh, that's unfortunate. Well, it's unfortunate. I was wondering if this might happen. Oh no, there's my video. I should love for the video to play, but it might not. We'll find out. So I want to think a little bit more broadly about what I would call sort of aesthetics of the moment, right? What do things look like right now, and how is that changing? If we zoom out beyond the parade and we think about the role of performance, spectacle, and the aesthetics, what do we see? So I would say that I think the Trump administration have paid really particular attention to the role of aesthetics. What does it look like to enforce policy? We have had administrations in the past. You can choose any kind of axis here. I'm going to stick with immigration because it's topical and it's what I know best. You know, President Obama earned the moniker deporter-in-chief because he presided over the single greatest volume of removals at that point in time, right? But he didn't make videos about it, and he didn't celebrate it at rallies. Now, similar policy, similar human consequences for the people involved, very different aesthetic approach, right, when it comes to what you want it to look like. You know, in some ways you might even say the Obama administration knew that it wouldn't play as well with their base, and so maybe they tried to keep it a little quiet. Where the Trump administration have decided that this is a talking point, this is the pound of flesh that they believe their base is keen to see performed, and so they want to make it more public. Okay, so how is this state power, right, how is it expressed not only through the enforcement of laws, right, but how is it carefully crafted as a spectacle? So in February 2025, perhaps we can share this with folks after, because I don't think this, it's not going to show it as a video. But the White House made an ASMR. Are you familiar with these ASMR videos? What does that stand for? I have no idea, but I can tell you how it works. My understanding is they are videos of soothing noises. So a lot of my students tell me they listen to them while they study. And so they're studying, they're reading, and someone is just chopping cucumbers, okay? Or perhaps they are running their fingers through a bowl of rice or something, just really kind of mundane background noises, which they tell me are soothing and can help with focus. I don't know. You know, they get younger every year, actually, and I stay the same. So I don't know, but the point is it's meant to be soothing, okay? This is what we need. We need to just take their word for it in order for the rest of the example to work. So in 2025, the White House creates a video. This would be the video here, right? And as you can see, you have someone shackled here. So this is called deportation ASMR. And if you watch the video, which was published by the official White House account on their, I think initially on their X, formerly Twitter account, but later also on the White House Instagram, certainly, it is noises related to people being shackled. The noises of the shackles themselves being picked up, the shackles being laid out on the ground in front of you, the sound of people walking up the aluminum steps of an airplane, the sound of the handcuffs clinking closed, right? And the idea here is that as you watch, no, there are no faces, it's all kind of cut off at the neck, but as you watch these people being removed, you are meant to find the sight and sound of that soothing, right? That is the premise here of an ASMR, deportation ASMR video. Right? Shortly after this, I expect many of you have seen these photos already. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem travels to SECOT, the anti-terrorism detention center in El Salvador that has gained a lot of notoriety here, in large part owing to the removal of roughly, because we don't have an exact number, roughly 200 people suspected of being members of a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua after the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act. Right? And Secretary Noem travels there and does this kind of photo shoot in front of the prisoners. There are many other photos here of a an obviously high security facility where people, you can watch them being treated quite appallingly, right? Down here we have additional footage. This is footage of the arrival of some of the people removed from the U.S. Into Sekot, and they're being kind of, forcibly bent over. They have their heads forcibly shaved at the time. And to go back to the spectacle point, the arrival, the reason we have this photo is because a press tour was set up to witness the arrival in El Salvador, right? These are not sneaky pictures that we weren't supposed to see, right? Like the footage of the arrest of Senator Padilla, right, where the federal officials tell the Los Angeles Times there's no filming back here, right? This was planned. They wanted these photos, right? And then, we can see the sort of the celebratory nature, right? Again, if we're sticking with the immigration example, we can choose others, but if we're sticking with this, we can see this kind of celebratory nature here, right? So power is being expressed here through these spectacles, not just through the actual enforcement of laws, right? And I think this is more than crude propaganda, right? This actually normalizes state violence. When I last checked, there were 100 million views of this deportation ASMR video. And not all of those watches will have been celebratory. I showed it in my class. I am some of those views, right? So some of them will have been critical. But that's quite a bit of reach, in a country of 300 and 20 odd million people, 100 million views is an awful lot. So there's a transformation here, though, of human suffering into content, right? Into something that you can consume. If you watch this video and perhaps like Elon Musk, you retweet it with "ha ha wow," or if you look at the photo shoot of Secretary Noem in front of Sekot and you see that as entertainment, if it feels like a reality television show, in part because of how it has been packaged and distributed to you, then you are perhaps having this state violence normalized for you, right? Jeff Charlotte, he's a scholar of religion. At the end, I have a long list of books to recommend to you, and these people who I'm mentioning, I will recommend their books to you. He's a scholar of religion and the state, and he will talk about how you end up with people who are constructed as being able to take a joke, right? This video is a bit of harmless fun. Why can't you take a joke, right? And if you can't, then you go into this other bucket. Oh, are you just too woke? You don't think anything's funny, right? Are you unfairly critical of the state because you can't just think of this as a little bit of harmless fun, right? During some of the rallies before the last election, right? We do a little bit of trolling. Well, I don't know that I want trolling from a leader, right? So what do we see here? There we go. So alongside those aesthetics, right? Those are the sort of background aesthetics of the moment. We see these new aesthetics, and I have to say I think these are all from last weekend because I finalized all of this. I could have had all new photos for today, right? I could have had photos of federal officers in Minneapolis because we see 2 murdered Democratic representatives this morning. Well, I think only one had died when I last checked the news, right? Politically targeted assassinations in Minneapolis. I could have photos of that. I could have photos of on the 13th, yesterday. Wow, of what we believe is the first arrest by the Marines of a civilian, the first engagement of the Marines in civilian law enforcement in Los Angeles, quite possibly a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which has been on the books since the end of the Civil War. We'll get to that in a bit, right? So these photos aren't even up to our current moment, but right. This is the first federalized deployment of the National Guard right here and the active duty Marines to Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles. I was there in 1992. Believe me, I know what it looks like to have the National Guard involved in keeping the peace, right? We know any of us who've experienced a natural disaster in California have probably seen the California National Guard. The National Guard is the contemporary realization of the state-based militia, if we're thinking historically and constitutionally, right? And so to have the National Guard pressed into federal service against the wishes of state and local law leaders is not common. Right. We have to go back to 1965 and the use of the Guard to protect black school children integrating into schools in Alabama for our last example of going against the wishes of a sitting governor. So these are uncommon scenes, right? Even to the extent that we perhaps think of Los Angeles as a place that's a bit more prone to protest, these are not scenes that we should think of as disconnected from this broader question of where we are politically and aesthetically. Right, so immigration protests, the estimates are that most of these protests, and I do not speak about today because I expect today to be much larger, but the protests so far have numbered more in the hundreds, perhaps in the low thousands, right? This does not amount to the violent insurrectionist mobs that they have been described as, right, by the administration. But the spectacles that we see here, the sending in of not only of the National Guard, but the use of what we call less lethal measures, rubber bullets, tear gas, flashbangs to disperse crowds of 300 or 400 people, far smaller than we might see if, and I'm going to get this wrong because I'm really bad at sports, but like if the Lakers win or possibly lose, or if a different sports team wins or possibly loses, right, we're going to get to that, right? But even something that we would say, what we are happy or sad about the sports ball, whatever, right? Okay, we would see more than 300 people out there, and I don't think anyone would send in the National Guard, right? We see Stephen Miller, right up here, Deputy White House Chief of Staff and architect of a lot of the anti-immigrant and anti-immigration rhetoric in the contemporary administration, right? He has this strategic use of insurrectionist language, right? Deport the invaders or surrender to insurrection. Gosh, and that's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, right? Not only are we faced with this option of getting rid of people who are bad, right? Deporting the invaders, right? But all of that language, right? Invasion, legally, the language there, very material to the use of things like the Alien Enemies Act, right? So wartime power. If you're going to call someone an alien, you're going to call them an enemy, right? You're going to say that they are part of an invading force. I think you should probably be thinking at least about being at war, and for now, that is a power that Congress has, right? Congress gets to declare war, not the president, not anybody else either, not the Supreme Court, right? That is a congressional power. Insurrectionists, now are we paving the way to the invocation of the Insurrection Act? I don't know, honestly. The conversations about it over the past few days have been really, really vague. I don't think it's impossible. I think what I would have said to you 2 weeks ago is if we see the Insurrection Act invoked, it will be in a border context, and it will involve greater deployment of military resources along the southern border. And it will be part of an effort, or described as an effort to assist CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, in border interceptions, right? Or to assist with border management. That's what my guess would have been. Now, I think it's a very high bar to try to present what has happened to date in Los Angeles as an insurrection, especially when you have, Newsom, he's ours, and Karen Bass and leadership in Los Angeles and leadership at the state level saying, we can manage this, right? That doesn't sound like an insurrection to me, unless, of course, you have decided that those leaders are part also of some kind of insurrection, right? And we hear echoes of this. Tom Homan, saying, I'm going to arrest Gavin Newsom turning it into a song on social media. We live in strange times. But is that where we're headed? Arresting Senator Padilla, right? Is that the moment here? Are we going to try to describe, is the entirety of California one giant insurrection? Right? Secretary Noem arriving in Los Angeles and saying, we are here to liberate you. We're going to liberate the people of California from its own leadership. Socialist, burdensome leadership, she called it, right? In a state where our leaders are democratically elected, and most of them by fairly comfortable margins, right? So this is part of the aesthetic of the moment as well. Who is painted as liberating? Who is painted as invading? Who is an insurrectionist? Who is an enemy? Who is a real American? And how do we know? And we are, of course, watching the courts for this this week. The deployment of the National Guard was challenged by Governor Newsom and on Thursday, which was the day before yesterday, heard in the Northern District of California, heard in San Francisco by Justice Breyer, in fact, the younger sibling, the younger brother of Supreme Court Justice Breyer, right? So they are related. And Justice Breyer said, yeah, I don't see evidence here of a set of circumstances that would give rise to a federalizing of the California National Guard, and I order the Guard returned to the control of Governor Newsom. He then stayed his own ruling, right? Because he knew that there would be an appeal. We start at the district court level, and then we go up to the circuit court level. California is in the Ninth Circuit, Court of Appeals. And so the Ninth Circuit will hear the next round of questions on the 17th, I believe at noon. And whoever wins there, whether it's Newsom or the Department of Justice, will inevitably then go on to also appeal that decision to the Supreme Court. So I expect legal questions about the Guard and the Marine deployment. They will play out at some point over this coming week. I don't know what the Supreme Court will do because they are, as previously stated, very busy trying to write all of the decisions or come to agreements about all of the decisions in the many, many cases they heard this year. So I don't know if they'll consider it on their emergency docket or if they'll make time for arguments, but I think we'll see that play out. Yes, and I think what I think might happen is that the circuit court will say the return has to be to the governor pending that application to the Supreme Court, because we are meant to err on the side of protecting against constitutional violations, right? But I don't make guesses anymore because I don't like to be wrong. No, I don't know, right? We're gonna see, but that's where we are. Okay, now what else can we can contrast this with our other examples, right? Here we are with January 6th, right? And this comparison helps us to think not only about the different ways that we depict and respond to state violence and the pictures of state violence, right? But also how selective our understanding is, right? Based on our expectations of law and order, right? There are people who the law binds but doesn't protect, perhaps people protesting in Los Angeles, and then there are people who the law protects but doesn't bind, right? Like many of the folks who, having participated in the events of January 6th, would later be pardoned, right? And later be have their actions publicly treated as not criminal. So, and I think one of the important things here, right, that we have to look at as Americans is the undeniable racial component. You have overwhelmingly white protesters at the Capitol protesting what they believed was the mishandling of the 2020 election. And when it comes to immigration protests in Los Angeles, you have a far more diverse group of people, right? But you have a very strong presence from the Latino community, there to speak out specifically against racialized targeting and harm. If we look at any of the examples recently of folks who've been detained or identified by ICE and interfered with in some way who turn out to be U.S. citizens, the reason that they have been detained, that they have been stopped, is almost always because of racial profiling, right? Well, they looked like they might not be American, right? They looked like they might be undocumented. What is that a proxy for? What is that a shorthand for, right? And is that perhaps where we have been all along here, right? This selective application of emergency powers, the language of an emergency or a crisis, is not just about kind of political preference, right, or something that is partisan. It is also really, really embedded in this racial logic, right? In these understandings of a racial demographic, of who gets to be right and who gets to be wrong, who is a threat. We even saw this with Secretary Noem's description of Senator Padilla, right? He was just this man, this weird man who lunged at her. Someone you've met several times before. I don't know that that descriptor would have worked as well if Senator Padilla had not been a person of color. I don't know. I think it's worth thinking about, right? So we have this selective deployment of law and order language, and part of this is about a heavily racialized control and a way that we think of law and who we exercise it against, right? So like I said, I think we have to look back, right? We have a lot of historical examples of spectacles related to racial domination in America and an intertwining of that with our legal culture, right? Things that we perhaps now look back on as morally abhorrent, but which were at the time not only perhaps considered morally acceptable by some percent of the population, but more often than not, legally codified as acceptable, right? Even required under some circumstances. So these deep roots of racialized spectacle, this helps us to understand our current moment, right? Remember I said back at the beginning, one of the questions is, what does this tell us about who we are, these spectacles, Los Angeles, January 6th, today's parade, what kind of story does it tell us? And does it tell a new story? Well, perhaps not, right? Because this is the first part of the book, right? This is the first part of the story here. So some examples up here, right? These are folks interned during Japanese internment here in California, right? This obviously one of the famous photos of prisoners being tortured at the Abu Ghraib prison. Then on the far side over there, we have, how old is she at the time? I think 15-year-old Elizabeth Eckerd integrating in a public school. Down at the bottom, we have this slave auction at the St. Louis Hotel. This is in New Orleans, right? There are lots of other examples you could choose from that period of time. And then down here, a depiction of a woman being hanged after being convicted in the Salem witch trials. Right? So we can look to, and here is a flag flying after, notifying about a lynching during the 1882 to 1968, right? The kind of lynching era in the U.S., aligning with the post-Civil War Jim Crow laws, right? So from colonial witch trials right through to Abu Ghraib, you can see public performance that has served to reinforce hierarchies, right? And especially these racialized hierarchies as the community, right? As all of us out here, as we witness and normalize this violence. Right? As we observe all of these things here, perhaps when they're put right in front of us all together, it feels quite jarring. But most of us don't think about most of these images most days. Right? They have become kind of part of our fabric here. Starting way back in 17th century, the Salem witch trials, right? These created templates for these very quasi-judicial spectacles. And of course, they didn't burn or hang witches, right? Because witches aren't real in the judicial sense. They burned women, right? They burned women who didn't keep tidy houses and didn't get married on time and grew suspicious herbs, right? That's that. But because we had this theater and this performance of a trial and a judge, we could sentence people, right? We could sentence people to death. We could sentence them to death for being different, for not being sufficiently subservient, for not doing the things that we needed them to do, right? So, and whilst the trials here, right, this is more rooted in misogyny and religious ostracization, we still see this public practice of watching this violence and having it normalized and having it be part of what we do, right? The slave auctions in the early republic, right, this one example here from New Orleans, right, you had seating for 15,000 people in the rotunda in order to watch this, right? You have in Savannah, Georgia, in 1859, there is a slave auction in which 436 people are sold in a single day, right? And people came from miles around to watch, okay? Kind of a spectacle, day out, bring a picnic. And these auctions not only were part of economic and social life at the time, right, but they also turned this human suffering into a spectacle, into something to watch, into something to consume, into entertainment, right? Between 1882 and 1968, we had over 4,700 documented lynchings. Impossible to say what the true number is, of course, right? And a lot of those also had a carnival-like atmosphere. In 1916, there was a burning and then lynching of a 17-year-old black child in Waco, Texas, and this drew spectators in excess of 10,000 as well to watch this punishment unfold, right? Amy Wood has a book on these spectacles of racial domination, specifically with regard to lynchings. On my book recommendation slide as well, right? But she says that the function here is not only to reinforce these racial hierarchies, right? But also to give people these assigned roles. Like we were saying with the ASMR video, you're either someone who can take a joke or you're not, right? You're either someone who can think it's funny or you're somebody who is, stuffy, unable to see humor in anything here. And similarly, with the lynchings, right, you're either someone who is there to watch and celebrate, right, or perhaps you are someone who is on the wrong side of all of that. Japanese Americans, right, this internment, I think this is a really important one for us to think about, not just because it's a California-based example, but because in the internment process and the transfer of Japanese Americans to the camps, you saw a much more orderly form of violence play out, right? The signs were posted up, right? People were invited to report to centers that would help them, right? Just go ahead and show up where we need you to show up, and we'll help you get rid of your house and your land and your animals and your businesses. And then we'll provide you with temporary housing, right? We'll intern you and your children in a camp for 2, 3, 4 years, whilst we administer loyalty questionnaires and assume, based on your racial heritage or ethnicity, that you are possibly a threat to democracy, right? And these images, I think in particular, all of these do some of this, but those from Japanese internment in particular, right, they give an assurance of sort of government efficiency, of legitimacy, right? We hear this with the contemporary removals. People had a final order of removal. They'd seen a judge, and then we deported them because undocumented presence in the country is something for which you can be removed. Sure, legally that's true. And so where you see this structured, orderly removal of people, perhaps you think, well, this is a sign of a healthy, robust, normal democracy. The state is operating as it should. It is following the laws are being implemented, right? But this kind of staged nature of the photography helps us to see that sometimes that violence is there's part of an aesthetic management there, right? Having what you see framed for you in a particular way. The school desegregation, right? Elizabeth Eckford's, right? That example over there. Again, this is with the Arkansas National Guard in the background, right? here we see a local example that becomes a sort of national spectacle as well. I think this is another important parallel for Los Angeles right now, being shown to the rest of the country, saying if you don't fall in line, this bad thing could possibly happen to you. Right? So these examples, right, we can go all the way back, like I said, from the witches all the way through to Abu Ghraib, right? They have these continuities that show us that sometimes the way that the state's violence is presented frames what we think about it, who we think of as a reasonable or legitimate target for that violence, how we see ourselves, whether or not we see ourselves as potential targets of violence or allies of those being targeted, accomplices of those being targeted. How do you see yourself? Where do you fit in? Right? But it's all rooted in spectacle. So back to our questions, right? I wanted to just kind of remind us of where we are with our questions. What do these stories that we've just seen tell us about who we are? And does that long history of spectacle change how we think about the things that are unfolding now? Does it give us additional context? Does it help us place them in our own history? Does it help us understand them as being on that side of supporting democratic expression? Or does it cause us concern? And do we feel like these spectacles are on the democratic erosion side, right? And what does any of this have to do with law and the way that we are facing a constitutional crisis? So even though we might have some spectacles, right, which we consider to be concerning, the photo shoot in Secot with the prisoners in the background, right, the ASMR video, right, these are not the only spectacles taking place right now. So we have some more examples here, right? Senator Booker spent 25 hours on the Senate floor speaking. That is also a spectacle, right? That is designed to draw attention to something. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and representative from New York, and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont went on a speaking tour, right? Attracted tens of thousands of people to rallies, and also is designed to attract attention, right? To sell merchandise, to do the same kind of spectacle, right? The Supreme Court in and of itself has become a bit of a spectacle recently. You know, I don't know if you're refreshing the page every morning when the opinions drop, but you know, maybe that's a bit much, but you probably see it at some point that day on the news or in a text message from a friend or somewhere, right? We should not be waiting with bated breath for new content drops from the 9 people in the robes. That's not good, right? Regardless of the nature of those decisions, right? We shouldn't be living on so much of a knife edge legally that we never know how things are going to go until those folks tell us. That's not very stable, right? The removal of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador, and then the traveling of that Senator Van Hollen from Maryland to see him, and all of the publicity around that, also a spectacle, right? Also designed to draw attention, also designed to communicate a particular message here, right? So are these performances that strengthen democracy, right? Which ones, if we think about today, is the presence of the National Guard in Los Angeles or the Marines? Is there an argument that that strengthens democracy? If you genuinely believe it to be an insurrection, perhaps it's protective, right? In fact, that is the justification, the legal justification for the troop deployment is in a power that is not enumerated in the Constitution, but is generally referred to as the protective power, right? The president is embodied to protect federal employees and federal property in the states. Is it protective? There are so many ways that we can interpret these things, right? Senator Booker's speech broke Strom Thurmond's record, right? His record was previously set in 1957, where he spoke for so long to oppose civil rights legislation. So perhaps Senator Booker's speech feels progressive because it replaces a record which was anti-democratic, right? Anti-equality. Perhaps, though, if you are concerned about some of the things that Senator Booker talks about in his speech, perhaps spending 25 hours on the Senate floor didn't achieve much beyond spectacle. Okay. So, same thing with the rallies and the press coverage, right? We have to ask ourselves, what kind of utility do we get from these different spectacles? Which of these are supportive of democracy and which of them are eroding democracy? Which of them are living out the values of our Constitution, our First Amendment rights, our rights to free speech and to gather peacefully, to petition the government for redress of wrongs, right? To have the press report to us honestly and transparently about what's happening. Are these examples of that, or are these further examples of anti-democratic spectacle, right, of this erosion, right? And I would say that the difference is not a partisan difference, right? It's a difference in the way that the spectacle plays out. So stories and spectacles that enhance democratic norms empower participants to challenge power. They create space for disagreement and debate. Right? They invite and engage with media scrutiny, with opposition voices, with people who would critique their approach. They operate within constitutional constraints. And they aim toward expanded political participation, towards more people at the table, more voices. Right? Whereas authoritarian spectacle demands passive submission, suppresses alternative perspectives, controls media coverage, circumvents constitutional rights and limits, and concentrates power in individual leadership, not in the people. So when we watch these spectacles, right, I think it's helpful for us. You don't have to use my definitions. You can come up with things that you can read and you think and come up with things that resonate for yourself, right? But what kind of power, what kind of story is the spectacle telling? Right. So just a few concluding kind of lessons and safeguards and things here, right? The First Amendment provides us with broad protections for political spectacle as protected speech, right? But constitutional boundaries do exist where performance becomes authoritarian action. We have several Supreme Court cases that back this up, right? We've talked about flag burning and content-based speech restrictions. Offensive speech is overwhelmingly still protected speech, right? Perhaps you've heard people from the ACLU say before, it's not necessarily that they agree with everything that everyone says, but they will defend their right to say it, right? And so people will say, oh, the ACLU defends the Klan. Well, if the First Amendment allows for the speech of the Klan in the way that it's being done, then yes, there they are defending it, right? So not all spectacle is something that can be shut down, even authoritarian style speech, under our laws, right? But we do have boundaries when it comes to imminent lawlessness and violence. So you also have to ask yourself this when you're looking at these things, looking at these speeches and parades and whatever else is taking place. Is this speech? Is this violence? Is this speech that is inciting violence, right? Those determinations ultimately will probably be left to the courts and then to the question of whether our other branches of government will cooperate with one another, listen to one another, right? Engage in that checks and balances process in the way that they should, right? But we do have some constitutional limits here, right? Some concluding lessons. We have this survey, it's called the Bright Line Watch, and it surveys U.S. academics on the performance of American democracy on a scale from 0, which would be a complete dictatorship, to 100, which would be a perfect democracy. This year's assessment results, which came out a few months ago in April, reveal this widespread view that U.S. democracy has declined, right? So the previous year it had been a 67. Now it's a 55 on this 100-point scale. And this would suggest, at least by one metric, that America is moving away from democratic norms. I have a colleague in my department, she studies the presidency. I tend to do more of the courts, I do public law, and she studies the presidency. And she started our last talk to the students saying, America's not a democracy anymore, right? We are in a competitive authoritarian country now, right? Where we will continue to have elections, but we are not in the same democratic space that we were in a few years ago. And there, you can read many different scholars on this, right? Robert Paxton, who I mentioned before, Timothy Snyder, his book on fascism. I'll give you some suggestions at the end. Our rights, our democracy, this is, I don't know, I wrote on the line here, perhaps that was a few days ago. So for me, I feel like the moment where everything changed was back in March when that first flight took off for Sekot after a judge had told the administration not to remove people. Because whether you want to play semantics with who knew what when and the difference between a verbal and a written order, the refusal to comply with a court order was a red line that, for me, we didn't need any more red lines. But if you need more red lines, we've had several, right? And I think the events of Los Angeles, and in particular the treatment of Senator Padilla, should be flashing red lines for everyone here. So what are some lessons that we can take to think about the intersection of spectacle and politics? How can we wrap up, right? So I would argue that to an extent, spectacle can help reveal more about our politics than just policies and policy enforcement can. Observable patterns of personal power, right, especially where we see enmeshment with military symbolism and this established ethic or this aesthetic, right, is anti-democratic, right? We have to watch closely how power performs itself. Constitutional democracy's survival depends on being able to distinguish between performances that expand versus those that contract political participation, right? Democratic spectacle creates space for disagreement and empowers these other voices, right? Allows scrutiny, contends with opposing ideas, right? Does not demand ideological submission, does not demand the suppression of alternatives, does not attempt to control the narrative or to transcend institutional or legal limits. Secondly, here, these historical patterns of racialized spectacle in America, they remind us of the narratives of our past, and they help us think about our contemporary situation, right? From slave auctions to lynching to photography of deportations and ASMR videos, right? We have a history of spectacle that serves to normalize state violence. Don't let them normalize this to you. Right? Professor Snyder has his book on tyranny, and one of his lessons, I think it's the 13th, one of his lessons is fascism wants you overwhelmed, right, in your chair with your emotions dissipated on the screen, right? I think it says he wants your body soft and your emotions dissipated, right? You know what freedom looks like. Don't let them tell you it looks like something else. Right. Thirdly, constitutional democracy requires active defense, right? You have to pick something, and you can't pick everything. Absolutely not. Sometimes people on campus will stop me and ask me about some piece of Supreme Court litigation that I'm not even following, and I just have to say, I am so sorry, I have no idea, right? I don't know. The USAID money, the mass federal firings, I don't even have space for those, right? I can only follow the ones I can follow, and you have to choose an institution that matters to you, and then you have to defend it. Right? Perhaps because you are league members here, maybe that's voting for you, right? And citizen engagement and information. Pick something that matters to you and actually go out and do it, right? That is how you push back against overreach. Collectively, together, right? Constitutional democracy is not a spectator sport. It is a group project, right? We have to be out there doing things together. The founders, I mean, they got a lot of stuff wrong, and you can go back and read the Federalist Papers, and sometimes it's funny. They're like, behold, we have designed a system that will never, ever be infiltrated by parties. And you're like, well, that didn't really work. So they didn't get everything right, but they had some cool ideas. But they really thought we would be hungry for our place in it, right? Keen to be involved, keeping an eye on things. And the stakes are really high now. If we want to recognize dangerous spectacle and respond to it, right, we have to keep paying attention and we have to keep going out there and getting involved, right? There are no kings in America, right? Just citizens, and we are here, we are responsible for our own self-governance. And that is the only way that you can resist anti-democratic spectacle, right? Anti-democratic decline. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Dr. Stepnitz. That was amazing. You've given us so much to think about. Holy Moses.
Do you want to do some Q&A or no?
We don't have time.
We don't have time. I'm sorry. I spoke too much. No, that's on me.
That's okay.
You can find me afterwards.
I am thinking maybe we have a follow-up meeting, a Zoom, where we can have the Q&A that we all want to have now, because I think we could spend another hour with just the Q&A, especially the discussion back and forth. So I think we'll work on that. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Mona. Thank you, Mona. You've done a spectacular job again. Mona is the fairy who magically makes these events happen, doing all her work in the background for months and months and months beforehand, and orchestrating all of the volunteers on the day of. Let's hear from a fellow suffragette and cousin to Beth Urich. Here in the back of the room, our member, her cousin, Jeanette Rankin, the first woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, said, and this is very applicable to Dr. Stepnitz's comments today and to what's going on today. Deep down in the hearts of the American people is a living faith in democracy. Sometimes it seems almost forgotten, but when the test comes, we find it is still there. It is our national religion, and it prompts in us the desire for that measure of justice which is based on equal opportunity, equal protection, equal freedom for all. Those are really powerful words to guide us today. This is a really challenging time of constitutional crisis, but it's not the first crisis that our nation has faced, and we in League must remain steadfast in our mission to empower voters and defend democracy. It's as relevant today as it was 105 years ago. All right, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'm forgetting myself. At 12:22, Carol. Raise your hand if you were a current member. Okay, wow, excellent, thank you. We do have some guests today. I just want to remind our members that you may vote, and guests, we love that you are here. Thank you for being here, but you may not vote. If you're not a member and not a member of another league, which some of you are, I hope you'll consider joining us. You can meet up with any board member. Chris Harris is our membership director. She's standing up right here. You can talk to her. And of course, you can join us on the website. So we will begin with a quorum report. Carol, can you please provide us with the quorum report?
So the membership as of January of this year, or February of this year, was 225. for League of Voters, North County, San Diego. And the quorum is therefore determined to be 23. And we have 31 members here at the meeting today, so we do have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. So we may proceed. So if there are no objections, the credentials report will be adopted. Adopted? Okay, adopted. Thank you, Carol. Next, we need to appoint a committee to review and approve the meeting minutes of the 2025 of this meeting after all is said and done. We have Belinda Smith of Oceanside has volunteered and Christine Dickin of Carlsbad. And we need 2 more volunteers, preferably, Ronnie. Carol, make a note, Ronnie.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Christine Dickin is not here.
No, but she did agree beforehand.
But how could she report on the minutes of a meeting she did not attend?
Oh, that is a really good point. It is true that a lot of people's plans changed in light of some, so we will need another volunteer. Okay, Jen Kerwin. Okay, and they could view the video, that is true. Yes. And it can't be a board member. Okay. Okay, Barbara Soulier. And you live in San Diego.
I won't be a board member.
No, that's true, and Ann won't be a board member. But you will be, so Ronnie can't do it, but Ann could, and Barb could. And, okay, do we have our 4? Barb Soulier, Ann Olmsted, Belinda, and we need a 4th. And Pat Cooney, thank you. Moving on to the adoption of the order of business and the meeting rules, which we will take in one motion. Please refer to page 4 of your packet, and you will find the full agenda. Our parliamentarian is our membership director, Chris Harris. Her job today is to make sure that we are adhering to the meeting rules. And Chris, if you would just review a few key rules and guidelines very briefly. Do you need the mic?
No.
She doesn't need the mic.
They make me do this every year. I'm not sure why. You are all reasonable human beings. We are polite to each other. We're not going to argue today. We can discuss. We won't argue. In technical terms, raise your hand if you'd like to speak. You will be recognized. State your name. You have 2 minutes to address your topic, and your remarks must be limited to that topic. You will not be called a second time until anyone else who wants to speak has spoken. Okay? On board recommended items, which is the majority of our items today, no second is required, and we use a simple majority. On non-recommended items that come from today, from the people here, we need a 2/3 majority for adoption. We will be voting by voice, right? So, and any member in good standing can vote. No questions, because we're all reasonable people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so now I need a motion to adopt the order of business and the meeting rules. Ann Olmsted makes the motion. No second is required because this is board recommended. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, any abstentions? All right, that motion is carried. And the order of business is adopted. Now, I would like to introduce our secretary, Carol Parker, whom you just heard of earlier. She's responsible for taking notes and drafting the minutes. Thank you so much, Carol. All right. We left no stone unturned this year in our voter service outreach last fall, a presidential election year. As you can see, with our candidate forums, pros and cons, our youth voter initiative, and voter outreach was a spectacular year with hundreds of attendees and participants, and hundreds and thousands even of volunteer hours. But another essential element of an effective league is understanding how local government works. And we do that through our Observer Corps. And we do have some observers here today. They are the eyes and ears of our league. They attend public meetings and educate our league about issues in the community by attending local government agency meetings in support of transparency and decision-making and good government practices. They are a source of advocacy to our league, and they alert us when there's an issue that our league can speak to. You can see here some of the groups that we monitor and some of those observers. And we have had some meetings in which the observers make their reports, which I invite you to attend. It's very interesting. And if you're interested in becoming an observer, we are recruiting. The observers are a source of information for our advocacy efforts. And advocate we did this year. We conducted legislative interviews in January and February. 8 league members attended the training, and then they did background research, and then they interviewed our legislators. And we were able to interview all the state representatives except one, sometimes together with the San Diego League. The interviews were all very cordial and informative, and actually the representatives seemed genuinely happy to see us. We wrote 20 advocacy letters. I think that's a record. Some in conjunction with the City League, and I testified in person twice. So it's been a very educational year for me. We worked diligently on our program goals, educating ourselves on the issue of climate change, the existential threat to humanity. The Climate Change and Sustainability Interest Group, led by Carol Parker, hosted monthly events and webinars. And Olmsted, I got those backwards, but Ann Olmsted led the Water Interest Group with speakers every month as well. And both groups did a great job of recording and uploading their webinars and meetings. So those have gotten a lot of views after the fact, which is really great for those who could not attend the meetings. Housing and Homelessness Interest Group was equally busy, focusing on study and reform and spearheading 17 of our advocacy issues. They really kept me running. They are the biggest reason Kathy and I were writing advocacy letters flat out every Sunday afternoon. This past year has been a crash course in leadership for me. And I could not have done it without the incredible support and guidance of my league sisters. Together, we've navigated so many challenges, we've strengthened our mission, and we have accomplished so much. If you don't mind standing when I call your name, Ginny Hallner. A constant source of encouragement, Ginny has been invaluable, not only as a mentor, but as our dedicated treasurer, possibly the least glamorous job in league, and handling just a tremendous financial responsibility of our corporation with skill and patience. I really appreciate your expertise, given freely and bountifully. We couldn't do it without you. Karen Sutton is not here today. But I need to recognize her. She has just done an amazing job quietly, unstoppably with the membership database during this transformation project. It has been arduous, and you haven't heard a peep from her probably. She's tenacious, precise, and everything has gone smoothly because of her efforts. Susan Connell. She is behind the scenes, a wizard. She keeps our website and the Facebook and our advocacy materials updated. Often I go to say, Susan, would you please oh, she's already done it. I'm so grateful to you for your expertise and your generous time and your wizardry. Mona Pastor. She is our events planning powerhouse, dealing with every single detail. And her leadership has really strengthened us this year. We've had a lot of events, and Mona has just, every time I've said, oh, can we do this? She never says no. And I feel it's really bonded our league this year. Carol Parker was the first person who said, if you do this, I'll do it with you. She has a brilliant mind and is amazing at everything that she does. And as an officer of our nonprofit, she really takes on a lot of administrative tasks that are menial, and she does them with humility and dedication. Thank you. And Connie. Connie is my parliamentarian. She's the one who says, Marianne, you can't do that. And she's been a real mentor. She's educated and guided me, always with humor and kindness. And has helped me navigate complex procedures that I'm meeting for the first time, and she's really helped build my confidence. I really feel like I've learned so much. Kathy Green is not here today. She has been just, again, quietly working in the background. You probably have seen very little of her, and yet she's tutored me with every advocacy letter. And I've texted her on Sunday afternoon, and she says, Marianne, it's Sunday, I'll get right on it. And Ann Olmstead, she is my league mom. Her laughter, her positivity, her unwavering encouragement, she tells me as often as she can, Marianne, you're doing a great job. And that's just so helpful, building my confidence and rewarding me and inspiring me this year. And Chris Harris, our League All-Star. League, she is in membership, at events, at candidate forums, at the Youth Voter Initiative, at the Lagoon Socials. Chris is everywhere. You name it, she does it. And she does everything, making us more strong and making it more fun. And Jen is my Miss Yes, I Can. She has energy. She polishes everything I give her, and humbly every task. I know she's designed for greatness in our league. And out here to the usual suspects, I see you at almost every meeting. Thank you. Your enthusiasm, your dedication, your presence keeps me motivated. And I know I have to come. I can't miss. We're going to do this because you are going to be here, and I have got to deliver. So thank you. I appreciate all of you. And that brings us to the year ahead. We have a state convention next week. Starting June 17th, we have 6 voting delegates and an additional 4 non-voting attendees. And if you would like to attend, you can register on the website. It's virtual, so any league member can attend. And I think it's very interesting and educational. If you're interested, just go to the California League site and search for convention, and it'll pop up. Juneteenth is June 21st. We do have a table at the Oceanside celebration, and we are looking for volunteers to hand out materials. There's going to be a sort of a spinning game to engage with the people that come to our table. Contact Rosette if you're available. We are looking for volunteers. Oh, and there's a sign-up sheet in the back. Thank you. In advance. It's not a very long event, and we'll take it in short shifts. June 15th, we have a very, very special event, an opportunity to meet the League of Women Voters U.S. CEO. Selena Stewart will be in town and has asked for the opportunity to meet league members. And we will be setting up a registration. It's by RSVP because it's held at a private residence, but we are allowed to bring as many as 40 people. So if you're interested, yeah, there's going to be plenty of room, and you can meet our CEO and talk to her face to face. So if you'd like to do that, look for that, and if you don't see it, just email me or any board member and we'll hook you up. We have County League Day coming up, Saturday, August 16th. The topic is Money in Politics in San Diego. It's going to be held at the Carmel Valley Library, and that will be very interesting. We have a panel of 3 speakers. It should be excellent. And then we will have some fall kickoff on Constitution Day this year. Stand by for details. Tuesday, September 30th, more than likely. It's still tentative, but I think that will be the day. We're going to have a really fun and interesting event. SUFS, the musical, SUFS, Suffragettes, SUFS will be in San Diego, and they, the organizers have invited us to have a league day that day during the run. We will have a table there. The San Diego League is taking the lead, and but we will do it together. We're thinking maybe dress in white, but really play up the suffragettes aspect of it and use it as a day to celebrate the league. Yes, suffragists. Okay, thank you. English is not my first language. And then, of course, we have our annual holiday luncheon in December. And you might be asking yourself after our speaker today, how can I get involved? There are so many ways. We are looking perpetually for voter service help. There's many areas, especially the Youth Voter Initiative in the fall. We'll be looking for volunteers. You can see Jen. Stand up, Jen. Okay, if you're interested in joining. And there's a number of volunteers there, so you can talk to them. Connie, our fearless observer chair, is always willing to train a new observer. We have many meetings that are in need of observers. And if you are really not up to consistently observing any particular meeting, we are also going to be launching a special initiative to monitor the agendas of various meetings, which is very quickly done. We can get a sort of an idea of whether or not a topic is coming up of interest to the league, and then we can make it a point of attending that meeting or reading the minutes afterwards. So this is sort of like an observer's light sort of program that will augment what we do and expand our reach. And Anne is going to be helping out with that. If you're interested, talk to Ann Olmsted. There she is. Mona is always in need of volunteers to help with events, so if that is your particular pleasure, please reach out. We'll have many opportunities for that. Membership, Chris is always looking for help, and that's another fun way of getting involved and meeting people. And I am looking for a partner. Susan and I are looking for a partner to help us with the voter, with communications in general, maybe with some of media, but especially the voter. So if you're interested, you don't have to lay it out, but helping write the articles, reach out to people, and collect everything in preparation, that would be so helpful. There is another way you can get involved. You can go to the LWV website, and there is on the front splash page several opportunities to find ways of getting involved. The first one says right there, it says, take action. And if you click on that, it takes you right to an area where you can put in your name and your address. It will write a letter for you and email it to your representatives based on your address. You could also take a portion of this letter and write postcards, and there are postcards on your tables, and there's more in the back. Mona has some. You can just write 3 lines from this letter and sign your name to it and throw it in the mail. Postcards are delivered very quickly. They're very quick to read, and you can make your voice heard that way. In fact, Mona proposed, I am your constituent. I urge you to honor your oath of office and defend our Constitution from overreach. That's, and sign your name, and you have said all that needs to be said. I did print out a list of league communications you can sign up for. There should be one on each table, I think. So you can take a picture of it, and it has websites and listservs that you can register for. You can get notifications to take action. League will periodically send an action alert saying, hello, League members, please, and they'll facilitate it, tell you to follow a link, to send a particular letter on a particular issue to a particular person, and that way we get the League behind us very quickly to take action on topics. And you can sign up for that on the LWB website as well. Okay. Next comes our treasurer's report. Ginny Hallner is our treasurer. She's right here up front, and she's available to answer any questions that I cannot. But first, we will give you a brief overview of our financial standing as of May 15th of this year. You received this in the meeting packet on pages 7 through 10, and we will send a complete accounting of the finances within 120 days after the close of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. And it will appear in the voter newsletter. Let's review the statement of financial position. You can see from the slide that there has been an insignificant change year over year. At the end of the last fiscal year, June 30th, we had $60,000 in total assets, and as of May 15th, our total assets are $58,000, roughly a $2,000 difference. This reflects our deficit from this year. We had planned a $10,000 deficit due to election year expenditures and voter services and convention, but despite all that, we did come in under that budget. Are there any questions right now that need clarification before we move on? Okay, thank you. Then we will file this treasurer's report with the secretary and move on. The next task is to review and approve the proposed budget. So, let me thank the Budget Committee for their time and effort. Mandy Butler was chair, Carol Parker, Chris Harris, Vic White, and Jenny, our treasurer. And let me mention that the board will be appointing a budget committee next year. So if you are interested to participate, let me or Jenny know. The job is very specific time frame, very short, basically from January through March or April. And if you have a financial background or just an interest, then I think you will find it a rewarding experience. Financial experience is helpful, but not necessary. All right, so let's see what the board is recommending. The proposed budget is on page 10 of your packet. If you need a copy, we do have a few copies available. If you didn't bring your packet, raise your hand if you would like one, and Carol will bring it to you. I want to take a quick look at how the transformation project has changed our dues, because this does have a direct impact on our budget. Briefly, the transformation project involves a significant change to how the membership dues are set, collected, and distributed between the local, state, and national leagues, and it began in early this year. We used to pay a flat rate to national and state, and we kept any money over the rate that we paid out. Currently, now, after the transformation, we all join LWVUS, and they give us a percentage back of the dues that they collect. So, for example, if someone joins at the suggested rate of $75, we get $15. So if a member joins at a higher rate, instead of receiving that additional amount as a donation, as we did in the past, we receive just a percentage. Therefore, our members can best support our league, if you want to support your specific local league, by renewing your membership on the national website, and then using a link or coming to the LWVNCSD website, our local website, and making any donations you want to support our local work. Which is tax deductible. Thank you. So with that background information, you can see this is our proposed budget. The result of the transformation basically has been a little bit lower dues have reduced our revenue, and the majority of our revenue does come from membership dues. Therefore, we had to develop a budget this year that's conservative for this coming year, because we have some uncertainty about how exactly the year will end after the transformation. LWVUS did say that they would make up some lost revenue for the first 2 years, but this payout is not assured, and therefore our projected revenue does not include any kind of commitment. We have also not specifically budgeted any fundraising. The incoming board will determine that. So, for example, we recently learned that some of our planned events may qualify for grants. So Mona, Jen, and I are going to work on that to see if we can get some grant money. So that is not here, but our net revenue deficit could be offset if we do win a grant. So this is our pessimistic view. Just keep that in mind, and it could change. I do plan events every month. I think that's one thing that we really learned in the last year, that even if it's small, even if it's informal, our members want to get together. We want to talk, we want to bond, we want to stand in solidarity, and that's really valuable. So we do plan to do that this year, and we need to put our focus on our mission, and we do have some really important discussion, presentation for our planned program. This is a really great time to ask if anyone would be interested in helping with the fundraising. Is there anyone just chomping at the bit to do that? Or even learning with me? All right, well, you know where to find me. So, do we have any questions about the budget? Then I would like to invite a motion to approve the proposed budget.
I make the motion.
Chris Harris makes the motion. We do not need a second because this item is recommended by the board. Are there any clarifying questions? All right. Then, we have a motion. All in favor to adopt the proposed budget, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the budget is approved. Thank you so much. Now we do have some proposed bylaws amendments. These should be fast. Carol Parker will present. And these are on pages 11 and 12 of the packet, and we do have a copy if someone needs them. Does anybody need it? Okay. The bylaws are the set of rules established by a corporation in accordance with the law, and these govern the conduct of our corporation's business and affairs. So right here.
Okay, well, thank you, Marianne. You've been doing a great job hosting the meeting. So the amendments, it's actually are pretty simple. There's 4, and they have to, and most of them are in line with, we have to have our bylaws agree with the state and national bylaws. So the first one, because of the transformation, there is no more student or associate membership, so that was removed from our bylaws, or that's what we're proposing. The second one is to reinstate local program planning to occur every year, and this was on the recommendation of Connie, who's was running our program planning this year, and that just is that just makes it so that everybody can determine what we're going to be working on every year. Third is just a very simple one. It's where you had changed our, the number of days that we have to have the board adopt the program planning before the annual meeting. And we just found that we needed the extra 15 days to get the meeting, our board meeting set up. And then the fourth one was straight out of what came from the California League, just to change the defining the termination of membership. So that's all we have.
So the California League reached out to us and gave us a number of required changes, and that's what's in there. So now on behalf of the board, I move to approve the amendments. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. So do we have someone to make a motion? Connie's going to be making the motion, and we don't need to have any second. So are there any questions? Very good. So we will call the question that the motion to adopt the proposed bylaws. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm just a little confused on the third one. It says reinstate the time for board adoption of program planning to 45 days from 60 days.
So last year, we voted to extend the time frame that we would need to present the proposed program 60 days in advance. It used to be 45, and then we voted at this meeting last year to make it 60, and then this year realized that's tough. So we want to go back to the 45 days.
Okay, so that we'll have the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Very good, the motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, next is the presentation of program, and I'll ask Connie to come up. Last January, we had a state program planning meeting. In April, we had local program planning, and then the Carlsbad unit also had a program planning meeting. So, Connie, take it away.
Hi. Thank you, Marianne.
Oh, and we do have some summaries of the program. Does anybody need those?
This came out in the packet.
Okay, it came out in the packet in case you want to look at it. Okay, stand by the podium. And I can drive for you.
Okay. All right, so this is the presentation of our local positions. Positions are tools that allow the league to speak to issues in our community. Program planning is the positions and the issues based on those positions that we want to concentrate on in the coming year. The local positions are only for our area of influence. That means this only has to do with North County, San Diego. So we have 8 local positions. 3 of them were not changed: budget, parks and rec, and citizens participation. But at this program planning meeting in April, we decided that we were going to change the language on some of the other positions. We did this through discussion and consensus finding. So in civil engagement, we added support respectful dialogue and discussion to our 3 objectives, which are raise public awareness of civil engagement, basics of objectivity, respect, and avoidance of hostility, and support educational opportunities on civil engagement fundamentals. And then we added support respectful dialogue and discussion. All of our changes were sent to the board for the board's review, and they recommended these for your vote. The other one we changed was land use. We added support local growth management of communities that is consistent with their general plan. Before that, there was also language from Escondido, and we removed that because it had to do with a Growth Management and Neighborhood Protection Act of 1998. So instead, we decided, it's a little out of date. So we added this instead. The next issue is transportation.
Yeah, transportation.
Okay, in transportation, again, it was, some of the language was updated. It said, we changed public transit should be safe, efficient, convenient, cost-effective, and affordable for the user. And under the objectives, we changed some of the language from take the lead in improving public education to just improve public education about public transportation issues. And from provide better service to low-density areas and encourage the use of existing services such as taxis, taxi vouchers, dial-a-ride van pools, and shuttles. And we added ride sharing, which was not around when we had these. And we took the 6th one, which was analyze ways to increase ridership through service improvements and regional goal for transportation. We said no, and we updated that to analyze regional transportation goals for ways to increase ridership. And the next one is social policy. There's a lot to say about that, but under educational facilities, we just changed that to make it public educational facilities. There was some talk at the time about should we have any language for charter schools. However, charter schools are covered under the LWVC positions for education. If you're interested, it has a lot of information. It is a vertical position. Vertical positions means we can use it at the local level without asking for their approval. So that's lwvc.org. and look up their work and their positions. But we did have some information about migrants, immigrants, working homeless in North County, San Diego, and we retained that with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is, one of the objectives was facilitate the provision of adequate and innovative housing. And we said that that was superseded by a regional position on housing and homelessness. Specifically, in the Housing Action Policy, they have created sufficient affordable housing supply and livable communities for people of all incomes distributed throughout the region. And they have another one is promote, maintain, and improve existing infrastructure to fairly distribute costs and amenities to safeguard and benefit the quality of life of all communities. So we kept this because we are the only one, we share our regional and county positions with our sister league, the League of Women Voters of San Diego, but only our league has language that's specific to these groups. The other one, we can going to discuss that one.
Issues for emphasis?
Yeah, so there was another position that you'll see that we have Population Acts and Sustainable Future. It is very iffy. So the board, after a long discussion, said what we're going to do with that position is suspend it, and it's under review because it's from Population Zero language from the 70s, and that just doesn't work today. You will notice in your packets that they are dated 2025. All positions are supposed to be dated by their study and when they were accepted as a position, except sometimes we got too busy and we never did that. We know that that information is lurking in various garages, and we are going to find it because it was before people were using computers as they do today. So we're going to look for it, but in the meantime, we decided to put 2025 on all of our positions so we have a baseline of when it was looked at and when we're going to make changes. Now, what we also did is we have issues for emphasis. This is what we're focusing on in the coming year. We don't do it within 1 year. That would just be madness. But it's what we're going to focus on, and then next year we're going to review how we did. Do we need to course correct? Some of this is just in the bones of the League of Women Voters, making democracy work on a local level, the Observer Corps, voter service, and being careful about campaign financing. We've also added, the members decided in April, we want to look into mis and disinformation, and we want to add civil discourse through respectful dialogue and discussion. We kept housing and homelessness because that is going to be with us forever. We kept climate sustainability with an emphasis on water because that's existential and we're kind of concerned. But one of our members said, let's add another bullet point, educate the public about the League of Women Voters, who we are and what we do. And we really want to outreach people that if you look around this room, you don't see them. We want to do outreach to younger people. We want to do it to men. And we want to do it to other active organizations that are specific to groups of color. We're hoping that we can broaden our reach. And as to the outreach to men, some of our male members have said they'd like to be in charge of that. And we said, great.
I think we have to vote now.
Yes, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a vote on our recommended by the board program, a program being Physicians, Issues for Emphasis for 2025-2026. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Vic. We don't have to second it, but we'll keep that in.
Was that Pat?
Yeah,
Okay.
Pat,
Cooney.
thank you very, Pat. And so the motion's been made. I'd like to have a voice vote of those of you who support this recommended program.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Anyone against it? Okay. Anyone who's deciding just not to make a comment? Okay. Then it passes. Thank you very much. When you see it on the website, it won't say recommended. It'll just be the work that we've already done. We have one unit in this league right now that's up and working, and it's Carlsbad. In Carlsbad, we have 3 positions. We did not change the general plan. That's page 18 and 19 in your packet. We have a position on the form of city government, and we added the city should widely announce via a variety of public media upcoming openings on city boards, commissions. Does anybody need a packet? Upcoming boards, commissions, and committees to invite applicants from a broad range of Carlsbad residents. Right now, we have something called the Carlsbad Citizens Academy, and it is about a week-long tour of all the things that Carlsbad does. At the end of it, they have a broad bucket of volunteer applicants. And usually, they'll take from that bucket of people who went on that tour, they're volunteers. And we said, let's make it a little broader than that. And that's what we are going to, that's our emphasis. We have 4 positions, 3 positions. We have a position on Tri-City Hospital. Please look at it when you have a chance, but we didn't make any changes to that. Our observer, Jane, could not make the meeting, and we don't make a move. Here. We don't make a move on Tri-City at the Carlsbad unit without Jane's input. And then we have our issues for emphasis for Carlsbad. We retain several encouraging members to educate themselves, educate Carlsbad members about Carlsbad's current policies for low-income housing. Excuse me. And our new one is educate Carlsbad members about local coastal environmental issues. And I want you to know that on June 17th, the City Council is going to make a motion to change an ordinance to approve an environmental sustainable committee. So we were a little ahead of our time. So on this vote, only Carlsbad members will vote I have a motion from a Carlsbad member to accept our program for the unit. Jen? Okay, Jen has made the motion. Does anyone?
Oh, account of just, okay.
No.
Okay.
So does anyone have an opposition to this, to approving of this? Anyone want to stand aside and not vote? Okay, so Carlsbad members, by a voice vote, please say that you approve of our recommended program.
Aye.
Now, the rest of you, any opposed? No. Then we'd like the entire league to give a voice vote if you approve Carlsbad's adoption of their program.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Any opposed? Thank you so much, Connie.
All my papers?
All your papers. Okay.
This is yours.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, now, the next item on our agenda, oh goodness, I'm sorry, is the approval of the nominating committee. First, I'd like to thank our outgoing nominating committee for their work putting together the slate this year. Nancy Sublette and Jane Dunmeyer were the co-chairs with 2 board members, and Chris Harris. And I would like to thank our outgoing board member, Ann Olmsted, for her work this year. She will be very busy with Water Interest Group and with the Agenda Monitoring Project. But we are counting on you hanging around as a President Emeritus so that we can call on you whenever we need you. So we need to approve next year's non-board members of the nominating committee. We have Ann Olmsted, who will not be on the board, and Christine Dicken have agreed to serve on this committee, and we will accept nominations from the floor for the 3rd committee member. Chris, do we have?
We have a nomination from the floor. I'd like to nominate, and she has agreed, Vanessa Forsythe. She's out marching somewhere right now, protesting somewhere right now, but she has agreed, and she will be the 3rd member. Just a correction earlier, on this year's nominating committee, Ronnie C. was the other board member.
Thank you, Ronnie.
So I guess do we have to vote on?
So we have to make a motion to approve Ann Olmsted, Christine Dicken, and Vanessa Forsythe to the nominating committee. Warren. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, we have a nominating committee. And then the last order of business is to elect our new board. And actually, Chris, why don't you take that?
Oh, I don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the important part, right? Figure out who's going to do the work. So, if you refer in your packet, the information's there, page 20 and 21, for the list of officers, directors, committee chairs, and other leaders. The bio of the new people, of our board members, are on page 22. But this slide shows what we are doing right now. Okay, so the people who have, Marianne has agreed to a two-year term as president, and boy, she needs her effort. Mona Pastor is a VP. 2 VPs are important to support Marianne, so we're doing that. Carol Parker has agreed to do 2 more years as secretary, and she only says nice things about her, so it must be very good. Ronnie C. is going to be our program director just for 1 year. Her remaining term is 1 year. Jen Kerwin, who is really ADHD, I'm going to say, or at least hyperactive. She's going to be social justice, which we haven't had in a while, or maybe ever, and voter service director. Rachel, Rosenstein? Okay, she said that was good enough. Is our new natural resources director. If we say yes, but we will. Susan Connell, we've already talked about today, and Connie is going to help as a parliamentarian as well as a director at large. So, do we have a motion? I think that's where I am here, right?
Yes. We need a motion to adopt the slate of officers. Warren.
Slate of officers.
Warren makes the motion. We do not need a second
Nope.
because it's board recommended.
Right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Abstaining? Good. Does that take us to the end?
That's it. So congratulations to the new board. If the board members would just come up to the front for 1 minute. We got through an entire year last year without actually taking a picture. Please come up, just one picture, please. And someone with a camera, take a picture. Very briefly, thank you. Thank you, and you, and you, and you, and you. The League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego, for your untiring advocacy and work and your camaraderie and your support in this year of extreme challenges. And there's another challenging year ahead of us. Because of you, we have accomplished so much this past year, but you have made a huge difference. And as we look ahead, as we continue to stand united and work with resilience and bring our shared vision together, I am excited. I'm excited. And here's to another year of impact and solidarity. So now is a moment. You have postcards on the table and pens. This is your opportunity for members to offer direction and suggestions to the board for this coming year. When we plan in August, we will have a retreat. We'll have reviewed these suggestions and taken them into consideration in our coming year's plans. So please write freely. If you can't think of anything now or you think of something later, email me and let me know. Give me direction. I am obligated to respond to your suggestions, even if we decide to do something different or you inspire or whatever. You will hear a response to your suggestion. Some very important initiatives have been started as a result of these member suggestions. So, having no other business on the agenda today, go ahead and write. Does anybody have anything written? Is anyone writing frantically and wanting to turn in a card? Okay, because I'll take them at the meeting, just bring them to me, okay? Or to Carol. Okay. If there is no objection, then the 2025 annual meeting of our league will be adjourned. All right, the meeting is adjourned at 1:14. If you are marching, if you need a ride, if you would like to meet with us at City Hall and you would like a ride, please see Neil.